Welcome to Bay Area Psychology. In 1976, Roger Mills and George Pransky began their clinical research with a focus on interventions to heal mental illness. During the course of their research, they became increasingly aware that the human mind appears to have its own immune system, a natural tendency to regain mental balance. Their focus shifted toward defining qualities of healthy people. What predisposes people to resiliency versus illness? We are fortunate to be joined this evening by Kristen Mansheim from the Mariposa Lodge Treatment Center and Dr. Mark Howard, a faculty member of the Psychology of Mind Training Institute. I want to welcome you both this evening.
Thank you.
I'm glad you were able to make time and join us. When we were getting ready to air, I had asked you about the name of this particular approach, Psychology of Mind, because I know that it's formally or also referred to as health realization model. So some of our viewers tonight may know it by that name.
Yes.
Why have you moved towards psychology of mind?
Well, we just wanted to give people a sense that it is a psychology, that what we're teaching people is about healthy psychological functioning. And it's more than just a realization of health, but more of a understanding of a total human psychological functioning. Well, so that was the reason for that.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I mean, what that made me think of was that when I was preparing for tonight, I was reminded of course, some Rogerian sort of approaches in terms of believing that people have health already present. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of teaching people to access that, I think. Is that an accurate statement, or?
Well, we would say that, you know, where this originated was from a discovery that all people have within them the capability for healthy psychological functioning. Yeah. And what happens over the course of one's life is that there's a conditioning that takes place in which people get caught up in using a way of thinking that really causes them a lot of psychological difficulties. So what we have found is if you could wipe out a person's negative thinking, if you could really clear their minds, what you would have in its place is a healthy quality of thinking. So were you able to clear a person's resentful thinking, what you would have in its place is compassion. Okay. It goes a little farther than what Carl Rogers understood.
Oh yes, it's definitely a more elaborated model, but yeah. I was struck by that sort of belief or seeing people as essentially healthy or as essentially positive. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a graphic that I think illustrates what you were saying a moment ago that I thought maybe you could elaborate for us. Let's take a look. This is the thought cycle that mm-hmm. comes from your research, and I went ahead and made a copy. Starts with a thought, I'm very angry, the feeling, hostility, rage, and then behavior, which might be aggression, verbal abuse, repression. So it looks like, from this model, that rather than emphasizing changing the way we feel, that you change the way that we think, that would be the starting place for us. Is that, Kristen, have you found that to be what, when you're working with the women at the Mariposa Lodge, you tend to focus with?
Well, we do talk a lot about thought. Thought is very important in psychology of mind, but it's really a deeper understanding of thought than other psychologies have even really known about. And the thought cycle can be a little bit misleading at first. Sometimes when you see the thought, feeling, behavior chain, you might think of rational emotive therapy or another type of cognitive therapy. It's really much more than that. As you mentioned before, psychology of mind is really a psychology of wellness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We really know that people have health within them. Okay. And what we want to do is draw that out. And that is what I'm looking for at my clients in Mariposa. I know that they have that in them, and I'm not going to abandon them for anything until I find that health in them.
Okay, so it sounds like, and for the viewers who are watching who may not know, my understanding is that Mariposa Lodge Treatment Center is a treatment facility for recovering women. I think you're a 77-bed facility.
74.
74-bed facility. Okay, so you have women from the point of detoxing from drugs and alcohol and then staying on for treatment very often.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so you have the opportunity to really see some progression with this over time.
We do.
Okay, all right. Now, it sounds like, or what I know from working with addicted women and men is that people don't start out with an awareness of their own health. It sounds like you, and that's reflected in the studying I did, that maybe you have an emphasis or an awareness of their health way before the client ever does.
Very much so.
Okay.
And in fact, it's really exciting about Mariposa Lodge because they want to have all their staff go through a training of psychology mind. They have seen such powerful results in terms of Kristen's work there that the director, based on those results, wants everyone trained with this understanding. And we do see the health before the client. And when we're sitting with the client, we really know in our hearts there's healthy functioning there. And that alone will help a client in a session to have that sense from their therapist that the therapist has an understanding that they have healthy functioning. Okay. It comes across in how we work with them.
You know, yeah, it sounds like a lot of the effectiveness of this model would come from therapist attitude from the gate.
Very much so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, in terms of helping the client to see the health that you already acknowledge, do you teach them to challenge their thoughts or to have alternative ways of seeing situations, or how do you do that?
That's a really good question. Maybe, Mark, if you'd open with that, and then I can add some more.
The difference for us is that we're not focused on teaching people ways to change their thinking. We're not even focused on having them identify troublesome thinking. What we have found is if people could realize that their thinking creates their total experience, their total psychological experience, that understanding is powerful enough for people to begin to change. So if somebody could realize that if they are thinking that their life is unfair, that they will then experience life as unfair, compared to somebody who thinks that life is, that they're grateful for life, they would see a lot of things in life to be thankful for. So once people catch this understanding that thinking creates their experience of life, they themselves will begin to change. That healthy quality of thinking emerges with that understanding.
So sort of like, given the insight that you do have options,
yes,
the natural healthy part of us would choose the option to feel better.
Automatically.
Automatically,
yes.
Okay, so that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something to that?
Yes, there are different ways that we work with thought, and it's different than a cognitive approach, like I mentioned before. We're not really working with the content of what people think. We're working with the fact that they are thinkers. We want them to recognize that they're thinking, just like we're all breathing, we're all thinking. Once they can understand that, then we can begin to teach them how thought, as Mark said, creates their reality. And the thought cycle is one way to do that. Thought creating reality involves thought and feeling and behavior and how the world responds to behavior. And that creates a total reality for a person. And once they can see that reality is generated from the inside, beginning with thought, then we can begin to teach them how to go to a higher state of mind or a healthier thought process. And when they do that, the client is going to be able to make a shift that's going to lift them to a perspective where they have their insights, they have their own answers, they have an internal resource that's going to guide them. And so what we see is in very short periods of time, people, women, particularly the women I work with, making huge changes. Changes that perhaps therapists or other people in their life have encouraged them to make for years, and they felt unable to do so. When clients move to a higher state of mind, by having an experience of how thought works, when they can go to that quiet place that exists really before thought and stand in that quiet place, what happens is all this innate health just rushes to the surface, and they have access to that again. And our goal is to get clients in touch with that, because once they have that, they have a resource forever. They have their own therapist inside. And that's really what we want to do. We want to teach people to be self-reliant and self-sufficient so that they can go on with their lives. So that's a little bit more about how it works.
Now, given that, have you ever experienced a client who experiences that place that you're talking about, where they have access to all of that health, and then say to you, I don't want that responsibility? In other words, I don't know how they would articulate this specifically, but I'd rather not have the responsibility for my own wellness. Thank you very much,
Well,
and prefer to stay a victim.
Well, we're talking about what we're talking about really is a shift that takes place within an individual that awakens a perspective about life that you really don't have a thought that you're creating that perspective. You're there already. So somebody could begin to, let's say, realize that they're thinking about somebody in a resentful way.
Right.
And realize that that thinking is creating this whole reaction and reality to life. And they back away from that, and what we would say is immediately for them, they would get a quality of thinking about life in which there's more compassion. So they would see the innocence of other people's behavior, things like that. Okay. And it's like automatic, so it's not like you feel like you have a sense of responsibility around that. You just see life that way, and you start living along those lines. And if people are really connected to this quality of thinking, it feels like a truthful place for them.
It's almost like, in some ways, it becomes as much their reality as the resentment was their reality.
That's right. Exactly.
So if I understand what you're saying, then it's not a matter of thinking to yourself, well, okay, I think I'll go ahead and think.
That's right.
Compassionately. Okay, it would be
you just
more,
are
I just
compassionate.
feel compassionately
Yes, that's right.
toward other
Yeah.
people.
It's not artificial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not artificial. I think the reason I've never had that response from a client is because when they get in touch with this health, it's not a responsibility. It's a freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know, in terms of the 12 steps in chemical dependency, people are encouraged in that first step to understand that they're powerless over drugs and alcohol. Well, my clients have felt powerless over their life for a long time. And for them to have their choices back is inspiring for them. They get excited and they begin to do things that they haven't been able to do in years.
Okay, so in fact, it sounds to me that this would be very energizing.
Yes.
Very much
Sort of
so.
experiential
Yes.
experience. You know, we're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. When we return, we'll learn more about these emotional choices.